This case has crossed a legal threshold it had not reached before. According to court records and official statements from law enforcement, the disappearance of Melodee Buzzard is no longer being treated as a missing child investigation. It is now a homicide case, and for the first time since Melodee vanished, prosecutors have formally charged her mother with murder. This development marks a decisive shift in how authorities understand what happened to Melodee Buzzard. What began as a search for a missing child has moved into the criminal courts, where evidence is weighed under strict legal standards and accountability is pursued through prosecution rather than speculation. The charge itself does not represent a verdict. It represents a determination by prosecutors that the evidence presented to them meets the legal threshold required to file a murder charge. From this point forward, the case proceeds not in public rumor or online theory, but in courtrooms, filings, hearings, and sworn testimony. Cases involving children, particularly those that unfold within family structures, demand precision and restraint. The consequences of misinformation are real. The consequences of silence can be just as serious. This update matters because it reflects how institutions respond when the facts compel them to act. Before continuing, take a moment to support responsible coverage of cases like this. Like the video, share it to increase public awareness, and subscribe to the channel for continued fact-driven reporting. Comment below with your thoughts on this development, and let us know where you're watching from. Engagement here is not about entertainment. It is about visibility, accountability, and public understanding. What follows is a careful, verified examination of what authorities have confirmed and what remains before the court. The prosecution of a case involving the death of a child is not a private matter, it is a public one. When a homicide charge is filed, particularly in a case that began with a missing child, it reflects the role of institutions charged with protecting children, enforcing the law, and upholding due process. This case matters because it tests multiple systems at once. It involves child welfare oversight, interstate law enforcement coordination, forensic identification, and prosecutorial discretion. Each of these systems functions within strict legal boundaries, and each leaves a record that must stand up to scrutiny in court. Public attention plays a documented role in cases like this, not by replacing investigators or influencing juries, but by ensuring transparency, accountability, and sustained institutional focus. However, that attention carries responsibility. The line between awareness and speculation is not optional, it is ethical and legal. Authorities have repeatedly emphasized that the legal process must unfold without interference. That includes refraining from unverified claims, avoiding assumptions about motive, and respecting the presumption of innocence that applies until a court determines otherwise. Public engagement that ignores those principles does not help the case. It risks undermining it. At the same time, silence can allow cases involving vulnerable victims to fade from public consciousness. Responsible visibility means following confirmed developments, understanding procedural steps, and recognizing that justice moves deliberately, not instantly. This coverage is grounded in official statements, court filings, forensic confirmations, and reporting from established news organizations. No claim presented here extends beyond what has been formally confirmed. Where information is missing, it will be identified as such. With that framework established, the focus now turns to the confirmed facts that led authorities to formally charge Melodee Buzzard's mother with murder. What is known at this stage of the case comes from a limited but authoritative set of sources: official statements from law enforcement, court records, forensic findings, and confirmed reporting by major news organizations citing those records. Authorities have confirmed that the remains of 9-year-old Melodee Buzzard were recovered in early December in a remote area of Utah. The identification was made through DNA analysis, which matched the remains to Melodee using genetic material connected to her mother, Ashlee Buzzard. Investigators have stated that this testing process took several weeks to complete, delaying any public announcement until confirmation was absolute. After forensic examination was finalized, authorities arrested Ashlee Buzzard at her residence in California. According to court records, she has been formally charged with murder in connection with her daughter's death. She is currently held in custody as the legal process proceeds. Bail has not been granted, reflecting the seriousness of the charge and the procedural posture of the case. Law enforcement agencies involved have confirmed that the investigation required coordination across multiple states due to travel that occurred prior to Melodee's disappearance. These agencies include local sheriff's offices and federal authorities. Officials have emphasized that the evidence reviewed to date meets the standard required for formal charges, but that the investigation itself remains active. These are the facts as they have been confirmed publicly. A child has been identified through DNA. Her death has been ruled a homicide. A suspect has been charged. Everything beyond these points remains subject to further investigation and judicial review. With these confirmations established, the next step is to explain how and why authorities formally transitioned to this case from a missing child investigation to a homicide prosecution. The formal transition of this case did not occur suddenly. It followed a sequence of procedural milestones that required verification, documentation, and legal review. Initially, authorities treated Melodee Buzzard's case as a missing child investigation. At that stage, the priority was locating her and determining her welfare status. Investigators collected travel records, reviewed surveillance footage, and coordinated with institutions such as schools and child welfare agencies to establish when and where Melodee was last accounted for. That status changed only after the recovery and identification of human remains in Utah. According to law enforcement, the remains could not be publicly associated with Melodee until DNA testing conclusively confirmed her identity. This step was essential. Without it, investigators could not legally or ethically reclassify the case. Once identification was confirmed, forensic examination established the cause of death as a gunshot wound to the head. This determination moved the case out of the category of a missing person and into that of a criminal homicide. At that point, investigators were no longer focused on locating Melodee, but on reconstructing events leading to her death and determining criminal responsibility. Prosecutors then reviewed the investigative findings. Charging decisions require a separate legal standard from investigative suspicion. Prosecutors must determine whether the evidence, as presented, is sufficient to support a criminal charge that can withstand judicial scrutiny. According to court records, that threshold was met, resulting in the filing of murder charges against Ashlee Buzzard. This transition reflects process, not conclusion. The shift from investigation to prosecution indicates that authorities believe the evidence warrants formal legal action. It does not represent a finding of guilt. That determination rests solely with the court. With the case now in a prosecutorial phase, attention turns to the individual at the center of the investigation, the victim herself, and what has been responsibly disclosed about her life prior to her disappearance. Melodee Buzzard was 9 years old. She lived in California and was enrolled in the local school system at the time she was last seen. Public records and statements from authorities indicate that her daily life followed a routine consistent with that of a child her age. She attended school, lived with her parent, and was known to extended family members. Officials have released very limited personal detail about Melodee, a deliberate decision intended to protect her dignity and to avoid unnecessary exposure of a child who is now the victim of a homicide. There have been no public indications that she had run away, was living independently, or had been formally placed in the care of another guardian at the time she was reported missing. Her absence was first formally noted through institutional systems when she failed to appear at school. That absence triggered administrative follow-ups and eventually contributed to the broader investigation that followed. Authorities have not suggested that Melodee's disappearance was voluntary or explained by normal childhood behavior. What is known and what matters for public understanding is that Melodee was a child whose presence was expected and whose absence was consequential. Her life was not abstract or theoretical. She existed within systems designed to track attendance, ensure safety, and flag concerns when a child does not appear where they are supposed to be. From this point forward, the legal focus is not on speculation about who Melodee was, but on what occurred during the period leading up to her disappearance and death. That requires a careful reconstruction of the timeline using only verified information. The timeline in this case is built entirely from records, surveillance footage, institutional reporting, and confirmations released by law enforcement. Where information is missing, those gaps are identified without interpretation. According to investigators, the documented timeline begins on October 7, 2025. On that date, Melodee Buzzard and her mother, Ashlee Buzzard, departed their California residence for what was described as a short road trip. Rental car records confirmed that a vehicle was obtained for this journey. Surveillance footage from the rental agency shows both Melodee and her mother present at the time the vehicle was picked up. These images represent the last confirmed visual record of Melodee with her mother prior to her disappearance. Authorities have confirmed that on October 9, 2025, Melodee was last seen alive near the Colorado-Utah border. The nature of this sighting has not been fully detailed publicly, but law enforcement has stated that it is considered the last verified confirmation of her being alive. Following that date, records indicate that Ashlee Buzzard returned the rental vehicle. Surveillance footage and transaction data confirmed the return. Melodee was not present at that time. Investigators have identified this moment as a critical point in the timeline, as it contradicts the expectations of a routine family trip and raised immediate concerns once connected to Melodee's continued absence. In the days that followed, Melodee did not return to school. School attendance systems flagged her non-appearance, prompting administrative follow-ups. Child welfare authorities and extended family members were contacted to determine her whereabouts. These inquiries marked the beginning of formal concern, though public alerts were not immediately issued. Between October 9th and early December, there are substantial gaps in publicly confirmed information. Law enforcement has not released details regarding Melodee's location during that period, nor have they disclosed the full movements of her mother beyond what is supported by verified records. Investigators have acknowledged these gaps and have stated that they remain central to the ongoing case. In early December, authorities located human remains in a rural area of Utah. Due to the condition of the remains and the seriousness of the discovery, DNA testing was required for identification. That process took several weeks, during which no public confirmation was made. Once DNA analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Melodee Buzzard, authorities notified family members and formally reclassified the case. This confirmation triggered the next phase of the investigation and directly preceded the arrest and charging of Ashlee Buzzard. This timeline reflects only what has been verified and released. It establishes when Melodee was last seen, when concerns were formally raised, and when her remains were identified. What occurred within the gaps of that timeline remains under investigation and has not been publicly disclosed. In early December 2025, authorities recovered human remains in a remote area of Utah. The location was confirmed through official statements from law enforcement, and investigators reported that the site required careful processing to ensure proper evidence collection. The remains were subjected to forensic analysis, including DNA testing, which ultimately confirmed the identity of Melodee Buzzard. According to officials, the testing process took several weeks due to the complexity of the sample and the need for definitive verification. Only after conclusive identification was made did authorities publicly announce the discovery. A forensic examination determined that the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head. Law enforcement sources and medical examiners have confirmed this finding. Specific details regarding the weapon, the circumstances of the injury, or the exact timing of death have not been released to the public, reflecting the ongoing nature of the investigation and the need to preserve the integrity of evidence. The recovery and forensic confirmation of Melodee's identity marked a pivotal point in the case. Prior to this moment, investigators focused on locating a missing child. After identification, attention shifted to understanding the circumstances of her death, collecting corroborating evidence, and preparing the documentation required for prosecution. Authorities have emphasized that all steps taken during recovery and forensic examination followed standard protocols for handling potential homicide evidence. This careful approach ensures that the evidence is admissible in court and that investigative conclusions are supported by verifiable data. With the forensic findings established, investigators were able to identify evidence connecting the recovery site and other collected materials to the defendant, leading directly to formal charges. The decision to formally charge Ashlee Buzzard with murder was based on evidence that authorities have confirmed through public statements, court records, and investigative reporting. This evidence is considered sufficient by prosecutors to meet the legal threshold for filing charges, though it is important to note that filing a charge does not equate to a finding of guilt. Confirmed categories of evidence include DNA analysis, which established the identity of Melodee Buzzard and linked the remains to the defendant's genetic material. Ballistics evidence collected from the crime scene and related locations was also cited as part of the evidence review, though authorities have not released detailed tactical information or specifics about the firearm involved. Additional corroborating materials include digital records, travel documentation, and surveillance footage that tracked the movements of both Melodee and her mother during the critical period. Investigators involved in this case coordinated across multiple jurisdictions, including local sheriff's offices and federal authorities. According to official statements, this collaboration was essential to track travel across state lines, secure evidence, and ensure the continuity of procedural standards. Every step taken was documented to meet legal requirements and to support the integrity of future court proceedings. The cumulative weight of these verified evidentiary categories formed the basis for formal criminal charges. Authorities have emphasized that all evidence cited publicly is either confirmed by direct investigation or through official records. No evidence presented here has been inferred, speculated, or released beyond verified sources. Following the confirmation of Melodee Buzzard's death and the collection of corroborating evidence, authorities moved to take formal legal action against Ashlee Buzzard. According to court filings and statements from law enforcement, she was arrested at her residence in California. The arrest occurred under the jurisdiction of local authorities in coordination with prosecutorial offices responsible for filing the charges. Court records confirm that Ashlee Buzzard has been charged with first-degree murder in connection with the death of her daughter. She is currently being held in custody and bail has not been granted. This decision reflects both the severity of the charges and the ongoing nature of the investigation. Authorities have emphasized that these charges are formal allegations and the defendant remains presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The legal process is now the primary mechanism through which this case will proceed. Investigators continue to review additional evidence, prosecutors are preparing the case for formal hearings, and courts will manage all procedural matters, including arraignment, motions, and pretrial review. Each of these steps is governed by strict procedural rules intended to protect the rights of the accused while ensuring that the facts of the case are presented accurately. Prior to this arrest, Ashlee Buzzard faced unrelated legal proceedings, including a charge of false imprisonment connected to a separate incident. That charge was later dismissed. Authorities have highlighted this history only to clarify the procedural record, not to imply any causal relationship to the current case. The ongoing investigation continues to be managed with multi-agency oversight. Law enforcement has stressed that all released information is verified and that additional developments will be communicated through official channels. The case remains active and further evidence may emerge as investigators continue their work. Despite the confirmed developments in this case, numerous aspects remain unresolved. Law enforcement has deliberately withheld certain information to maintain the integrity of the ongoing investigation and to protect the legal process. The following questions represent gaps in publicly confirmed knowledge. What occurred between October 9th, the date of Melodee's last confirmed sighting, and the discovery of her remains in early December? Where was Melodee during this period, and who, if anyone, had contact with her? What were the precise circumstances surrounding the gunshot wound that resulted in her death? How do travel records, surveillance footage, and other institutional reports align with the timeline of her disappearance? Were there any additional individuals involved or witnesses who have not been publicly disclosed? Why was public awareness of her disappearance delayed despite school notifications and rental vehicle records? How are authorities coordinating across multiple jurisdictions to ensure the investigation is thorough while preserving evidence for prosecution? These questions remain open because authorities authorities have only released information that is verified and legally permissible at this time. Filling these gaps publicly would risk compromising both investigative integrity and the fairness of future judicial proceedings. Acknowledging these unanswered questions is not speculation. It is a factual representation of the current status of the case and the responsible limits of public disclosure. Cases like this place a responsibility not only on investigators and prosecutors, but also on the public following developments. Awareness of confirmed facts can support accountability, but speculation, online accusations, and the spread of unverified claims can hinder the investigative and legal process. Responsible engagement means focusing on confirmed developments, understanding the procedural steps being taken, and respecting the rights of both the victim and the accused. Public attention should be framed as visibility for due process, not as entertainment or judgment. Commenting, sharing, or discussing the case is appropriate only when grounded in verified information from official sources. Authorities have repeatedly emphasized that the legal system functions best when investigations are allowed to proceed without interference from rumor or social media conjecture. Ethical engagement also includes understanding the limits of what has been released and acknowledging that some details will remain confidential for the duration of the investigation and court proceedings. By following these principles, the public contributes to accountability, helps ensure institutional diligence, and maintains respect for the integrity of both the investigation and the individuals involved. Civic responsibility in cases like this reinforces the seriousness of the legal process and protects the dignity of the victim. Melodee Buzzard was a 9-year-old child whose life was tragically cut short. The recovery and forensic identification of her remains, confirmed through DNA analysis, transformed this case from a missing child investigation into a homicide inquiry. Authorities have charged her mother, Ashlee Buzzard, with murder, and she is currently in custody pending the ongoing legal process. Bail has not been granted, and all procedural steps continue under strict adherence to legal standards. At this stage, the case is guided by verified evidence, court filings, and procedural oversight. Investigators continue to collect information, and prosecutors will prepare the case for formal hearings and trial. Many questions remain unanswered, reflecting the complexity of the investigation and the care required to preserve the integrity of the legal process. As the public observes these developments, it is essential to maintain a focus on verified facts, due process, and ethical engagement. The responsibility lies in recognizing the severity of the crime, supporting institutional accountability, and avoiding speculation or sensationalism. This story is not over. The investigation continues, the courts will evaluate the charges, and the legal system will determine outcomes based on evidence. For now, the focus remains on honoring the life of Melodee Buzzard, understanding the confirmed facts of the case, and maintaining the integrity of the ongoing legal process. Every responsible observer contributes to a system that values truth, justice, and dignity over conjecture or outrage.